Hey y'all, Big Tim here. Thanks for tuning in for the second edition of Truth Behind the Trophies. Today's story comes to you from Yatesville Lake in eastern Kentucky. May the 30th, 2007. A little over a month and a day since my last Kentucky Bass Federation, or KBF, win on Lake Barkley. Now, this is the second year after the split, or what became known as the split, where the Kentucky Bass Federation, or the whole Bass Federation, split and actually formed the Bass Nation, or Bass Federation Nation as it was called back then, and the Federation. So, in those days, 2007, the Bass Nation used to like to try to schedule their tournaments on the Saturday before the Kentucky Bass Federation on Sunday, so that a guy could go and fish two tournaments in a weekend. And I loved that idea. That was the greatest. You're going to be there anyway, what the heck. So this time, my new co-angler that I had stood me up, wasn't able to go. I don't know if he had work or what. So he stood me up, and I didn't have a guaranteed non-boater. So I went to practice, got there Friday, and actually got on some fish. I had been catching fish here on the Ohio River on a shaky head. And I know you've heard me say it before, I don't like spinning rods. I used to use spinning rod a lot years ago. I can't say I was a master with it, but I was more comfortable with it than I am now. So I'd been catching some fish on the Ohio River with a shaky head, a black and blue, the old 3X from Strike King that stands straight up. Those were awesome. I had been catching fish on Kentucky Lake with them. I've been catching fish on the Ohio River with them. And I went to Yatesville, and for some reason I left my bag of black and blue 3X shaky heads at home. I had like two in the boat, which if you know the 3X, it doesn't rip. It generally will stay together. You generally don't have to worry about it. But if you get hung up, you lose them. I'm frantic. I went out and had a pretty good practice, but I lost both of those worms. So I'm frantic, and I went looking at some different bait stores, and I finally thought I found black and blue. And I bought a bunch of power bait, black and blue, or what I thought was black and blue, straight tail worms. When I get them out to the boat and I'm starting to rig everything else, I realize they're blue fleck. They're not black and blue. Blue fleck is almost like a purple, a really dark purple with blue flakes in it. So, I thought that's all I have to go with. That's what I'm going to do. So like I said, I did not have a guaranteed non-boater with me. So on the Bass Nation tournament, or KBFN tournament, that was on Saturday, I got paired up with another boater, a boater draw. Since he had a guarantee and I didn't, that's what we did. The guy I drew out was Dwayne, and he's a local guy, and lives up there around Yatesville. Told me he was catching some fish up in the river. So I told him, I said, hey, you're local, you're up in the river, you know how to get up there and I don't. We'll take your boat and I'll just fish behind you. And when it comes to my time, my fish are more down toward the dam. I said, we'll just split the time up. So we go up into the river in a major fog. And it's so foggy that actually Dwayne loses his way. And I kind of saw a sign on the bank, and I said, hey, Dwayne, I think we're in a creek now. We're not in the river. And we kind of paused, and he tried to find the sign again that I saw. Sure enough, we were in a creek. So we ended up pulling out and going back up into the river a little bit further. And I think Dwayne had a couple fish up in there. And I didn't have anything. So I sat and waited, and I miscalculated the time, because if you do a boater draw, you're supposed to split the time equally. And I miscalculated the time by 1 hour, and not only did I miscalculate the time by an hour, I also didn't account for the run time back to my fish. So really and truly, instead of giving myself 4 hours to fish, I gave myself about 3, not counting the run time. So we left his spot with giving me 3 hours to go. And, Dwayne was gracious as anything. He let me run his boat, which was a little difficult. I was having problems because at that time I had a Minn Kota trolling motor and he had Motor Guide. And if any of you guys have ever switched back and forth, Motor Guide's buttons are on the left, I think, and Minn Kota's are on the right, or vice versa. I can't remember which it is. But man, it was messing with me, and I was really having a hard time. So I showed Dwayne how I was catching my fish. I had been catching my fish on bluff type banks with this shaky head. It's where the fish had basically come out from spawning and went straight to the deep water on the bluffs. And I'd been catching them pretty good. And the first fish I caught on my spot was a 3-pounder. And I thought, oh man, here we go. Well, it didn't take old Dwayne long, and he's back there fiddling in the back of the boat, and he's rigging him up a shaky head. And he's casting, and he's getting connected with fish as well. But I'm not anymore, and I can't figure out what's going on. Why can't I get bit? So by the end of this day, I finished right in the middle of the pack. Dwayne ended up 3rd or 4th, I think it was, basically because of my fish. And it was killing me. I could not figure out why he was getting bit and I wasn't. And I finally went and talked to him and saw what he had, and he was actually using a little heavier shaky head than what I had been using. I had been using like an 1/8 ounce and he was using a 1/4. Most of the time you think shaky head, you want a lighter head. But in this case, the heavier head made the difference for him. So I beat myself up that evening while I was camping. I was at the campground and I was by myself. I didn't have any other friends with me or anything else. So I kind of beaten myself up because I let this one get away. I really knew what I needed to do to win. And I just didn't make it happen. But I was prepared. I knew I wanted heavier jig heads, which I had. And I had these worms. And I had 2 rods rigged up with them. So the next day for the KBF tournament, I draw out with a guy who is kind of a known stick. And he says, man, I've been up here. I'm not on anything. I'm not around any fish. Have no idea what we need to do. I said, well, I think we can catch us some fish, both of us. I think we can do well. I've got a good idea. So we go to blast off that morning, and we talked about the fog from the first day. Well, the fog was even 10 times worse on the second day. I'm actually amazed that we blasted off. I mean, you really couldn't see more than 30 or 40 feet in front of you. And Tommy, like I said, we were boater draw. I'm in Tommy's boat. And Tommy's like, I'm uncomfortable running this fog. I said, yeah, me too, man. I don't like being in this. I said, let's just pull up right here and we'll fish. Well, I'm throwing this little shaky head. And before the fog lifted, I had a limit. And I was feeling pretty good. Hey, I've come to Yatesville here, and I've been there several times before and never really caught anything of any substance. And I was feeling real good about it and had a good limit. So we ran a bunch of other spots. We had a couple of spots that Tommy wanted to fish. And since I already had a limit, I'm cool. You know, whatever you want to do, man. I think Tommy might have had 1 fish. So we went and ran a bunch of the stuff that he wanted to go do. And which was kind of nice because one of the spots that he showed me, I actually used later on down the road. So after the day goes on, he says, man, I can't get anything going, so let's go back to doing what you were doing. You want to go to any more spots? And I said, I've really exhausted all the spots that I knew I had fish on, but driving up and down the lake, I saw several more that looked a lot like it. And basically, like I said, we're looking at channel swing banks, you know, where the channel is actually going in, forming a bluff on the bank. So we hit 2 or 3 more, and I called about 3 times, I think it was. And can't remember if Tommy ended up getting a limit or not, but the opportunities were there for him. He ended up, I gave him one of my shaky heads, I gave him the worm, I gave him the whole bit, and he started fishing it too and started catching some fish. But man, we were catching fish and nobody else seemed like they were. We would go and fish a point that was leading away from the run-in, or the bluff, the end of the bluff, and we just seen some guys pull off of it, and we went up there, and I think we cracked 3 fish off of it after these guys just pulled off of it. And they watched us catch 1 or 2 of them. They pulled in, "What are you guys doing?" So we showed them how we were shaky heading, and it was working for us. Again, blue fleck. Who would think a dark color like blue fleck in that clear water that is Yatesville Lake would work? But it did that time in the spawn. So we go back up there, and this time, you know, the month prior, I was one of the first ones to weigh in. Well, this time I'm one of the last guys to weigh in. So I walk up to the scales, dump my bag out, and I say, "Hey, what's leading this shindig?" And the guy without weighing my fish says, "You are." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you are." Well, I guess at the time it wasn't even close, but one of my other buddies came in a little while later, and I ended up having 12.21, and I think Scott had 11.90, I think it was, something like that. So I just kind of edged him out. But man, what a feeling. So it's really awesome. I'm driving home, and like it's a 3-hour drive from Yatesville to my house. I'm driving home, I'm calling Lori, I can't believe I've just won 2 tournaments in a row, my first 2 KBF wins. Now mind you, before this, I don't think I even cracked the top 10. I definitely hadn't cracked the top 5, but I mean, I was ecstatic. It was incredible. It was such a great feeling. And all the way home, it was just incredible, you know, and the fact of the matter is the 3rd tournament is on my home water. It's coming to Carrollton here on the Ohio River. And I'm thinking, wow, I might have a chance for Angler of the Year here. And then Carrollton happened. That's another story. We'll talk about that another time, because that is not a truth behind the trophy. That would be more like maybe we'll start another series. What would we call that? The tragedy other than trophy. Who knows? But anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you the next time.